Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this brand new discipleship course on the Kingdom of God. There are so many things on the subject of the Kingdom of God that we could discuss. There are so many routes that we could go. But one thing we must remember, and that is that Jesus is the King of this kingdom. And without a relationship with him, then we may just as well be in any other kingdom. The kingdom of this world is based on a system, not on a person, not on a relationship. But the kingdom of God is also a kingdom that has its own system, its own principles. But the kingdom of God is based on our personal relationship with Jesus. So if you've been born again today, and I mean truly born again, for instance, you've given your life to the Lord, you've made that confession with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and you've believed it in your heart, then you are now a citizen of the kingdom of God. Another way of saying it is the kingdom of heaven. You are a citizen of the kingdom of heaven, and Jesus is your king. And this is really important because there is no other place to be other than in the kingdom of God. And there are a few important things that Jesus said. For instance, he said we must seek first the kingdom. Another thing he said was that unless we are born again, we cannot see the kingdom of God. And unless we are born of the Spirit, we cannot enter the kingdom of God. Now we're going to be addressing all these things in time. But today I happened upon a verse in Isaiah 52:15. And in context, this verse was talking about the kings of other kingdoms, the kings of the world system, and how that they would come to know, in the right environment, they would come to know the kingdom of God. The first part of this verse, verse 15, says that what had not been told them, they shall see. And this I find really exciting and really interesting, because to me, it speaks to any one of us that, we can have in our conscious mind, we have this idea that we know everything. We're merged into our own conscious environment. And in that environment, we feel as though we know what there is to know. We cannot sort of see beyond what our mind can conceive. And I realise that I am responsible for my own limitations. God is not limited. He wants me to train myself to see and to understand and to discern and perceive much, much more than I do at the moment. In the next part of the verse, it says, what they had not heard, they shall come to understand. And this kind of reminds me of the story of Abraham. And before Abraham had an encounter with God, he did not understand some of the things that he then came to understand after he'd had an encounter with God. And you can read in Genesis chapter 15 of this encounter with God, where God showed him, he said, come out, Abraham, and he showed him all the stars that were in the sky. And if you look up in the sky, we get a lot of pollution, light pollution nowadays, so we can't see what Abraham probably saw all those many thousands, I think, of years ago. And he would have seen just countless stars. It must have been a glorious sight. And God was saying to him that his descendants would be more than those stars. And once he'd had that encounter with God, and God had told him those things, and he'd heard God say to him those things, he began to understand his calling and his importance in the kingdom of God. In Luke 8:18, Jesus says to his followers, be careful how you hear. For he who has, much more will be given. But he who has not, what he has will be taken from him. And I do believe that this is very much talking about how we hear the word, how we hear the things that the Lord has to say to us, and how that when we do hear properly and carefully, then we will come to understand so much more about the life of following Jesus and the kingdom of God that we've come into. We will understand so much more about these things, and the more we understand, the more we will understand that those things come in layers and layers, and it's like it's added to us the more we understand. We cannot come to know the King of the kingdom, and therefore the kingdom itself, if we do not take time in the word, if we do not continue to be a follower of Jesus 24/7, always learning, always coming to know, always coming to the truth. This is the way we grow as children of God, and this is how we grow in our soul life, how we grow in our life per se. This is how we grow as Christians, by spending time in the word and putting it as a priority in our lives wherever possible. And I know there are seasons in our lives, for instance, when we are working full-time, or when we're raising children and we're at home with them, or we're doing both, working and raising children, raising a family. There are seasons in our lives where this can be, a real challenge. But I think that, going back to my own life, when I was raising children and working, I made time for those things because they were important to me. And I do believe it has reaped rewards in my spiritual life and in my life generally. And I definitely feel that more has been added to me the more I've come to understand. So as I've developed knowledge and understanding on a particular theme, I have found that God has added to that in his own way, and he's also brought me on to the next stage of my Christian journey quite unexpectedly and quite brilliantly, discipling me, teaching me, holding my hand and taking me on a journey. So I'm really excited about this journey, this theme of the kingdom of God, and though it's small beginnings at the moment, we're going to get into it, and it is going to be life-changing. So I hope you'll continue to join me on this journey, and I hope to see you the next time.